So here we are. We are in the midst of it now. Sorry if the last video that you might have seen was a little bit loud. I don't know why that was the case, but it seemed like the audio is way up. Do my best. Hopefully you're able to turn it down. Um, yes, so I've decided that the best I can do at this moment is speak to the two courses I have running simultaneously right now. Obviously, because we've had the large um, mass celebrated winter holiday, then I have done my fair duty. Also have a fair share of Yuling over the last little bit of time. I hope you have as well. But I also want to speak to the stuff not only about the nighttime of year, but also things that relate to the Venus retrograde. So we're going to have two courses collide, and we just might as well. They are in my mind anyway, so here we are. And I apologize for those of you that are only following along on one of these thought trains that I'm running at the moment, but you know, I'm sure you've got many that you're carrying at the same time too, so it probably feels like I'm at home with you at the moment, or you're at home with me. Um, so yes, where to begin? I think that one thing I would say really quickly for those that have been doing the nighttime of year journey and tangling with what it means to be in this dark time of year, we are still in it. So even though the solstice marks the longest night, which we've been leading up to, um, it doesn't mean that it's suddenly now summertime. And so really, technically, if we want to think about it as the equinox in the autumn taking us into the dark time of year, it's actually with the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, that we are going to be taken out of the dark time of year and move into the light half of the year. So we still have a while until March, and this is the time up where I've lived for the last 10 years in the UK, where it does get quite dark. We do notice, and there are places obviously way further north than here, um, but if you do notice how quickly we descend into darkness, and equally how quickly we descend, how quickly we move forwards towards light again. I think this is an interesting thing to think about, and I do think that this is where I would love to do something at the end if you've been following along with this and think this is something that'd be fun. It's kind of like where we ended up. And I would love to do that as a live session with those that would want to attend, and we can record it for everybody and just see what having this time of extended engagement with the powers of darkness and the importance that night brings and its role within everything um, has been for everybody, and a chance for people to share and for us to discuss and chat a little bit more and make merry together. But in the way that the old some of the older calendars, particularly Scandinavian cultures, we, at least as far as we can understand them, marked what we think of as Yule. It really began with the new moon that we had most recently in Capricorn. That wasn't that long ago. Let's see, I should know by heart, but already that was on the 2nd of January. This is actually, and for me, the new moon, like as an astronomical event, is something that is something we have tools and mathematics that measure it in a like this exactitude and to a lot of precision. But to most cultures that have used the moon as something that shows us time, as the lady or lord of festivals, if you will, is the marker of seasons and the keeper of the festivals, we are really looking for that first appearance of the moon. So if you saw it, perhaps there's an image that I put up on my Instagram feed, which is at Cunningham Folk on Instagram. If you would like to, you can see I was able to catch the first appearance for us here where I live locally of the moon. We've had some really cloudy conditions, but I was able to see this moon, and this moon is called the new king, and it's thought of as like an embodiment in many ways. This lunation that we are under now, between now, 2nd of January, and then going towards um, I believe the 16th, 17th of January, where we have the full moon. This is um, the old Yule. So many of us, we have done our contemporary timekeeping version of the holiday already, and it comes with its own burdens and gifts. I'm sure that all of us have been familiar with that. But simultaneously, maybe a lot of your time at that moment was kind of taken over by um, commitments that you have within your family and responsibilities to celebrate in a very particular way. Whereas now we have an opportunity, if you want, to tangle with an older form of Yule. You do these things I've spoken about in other videos. Now's the time to, if you think about this is the coming of the light, we celebrate this moon as it goes towards its fullness as being the new king. It's like the new year. So we can welcome in the new year. We can try to connect with that moon as a way of embodying, seeing the light come forward. So what we have is generally we know in this way of rendering time that we have entered into a dark time of year. We could almost think of this the way that some astrologers do, that this is a solar reckoning of time, and this has to do with the longest night, long and shortest day, is like an hour hand, and the moon now sweeps in with the first new moon after the darkest night, then registering the coming back of the light. So this is like the second version of it, saying the new moon being the darkest moment at the darkest time of year, because now the sky at night is also dark as hell too. And now we have the night is also showing us through the moon's phase and course, showing us through his course the coming to fullness as being a return of the light. So we're getting all of these different festivals are like, yes, it's coming back. And so in a lot of the stuff that I have tried to help us frame it is that darkness and those things that are able to manifest and show themselves in a time of darkness are vital to the recovery and rediscovery and return of the light. So this is like the return that's happening now. And so if you feel up to it, you can polish every surface that can be polished in your house, or I bet many of you have some very special tools or candlestick holders or something that might be powerful to polish. So I polish all of my metal tools till they glisten, at this time, just to welcome in that light. We burn candles at night as a way again of saying like the light is returning, it's coming back. And similarly, we can still go on the year walks that I talked about with you in a previous video, where we fast a bit and we can do some special prayers and we journey out in silence to places where the dead are buried within our local place. And we do this out of silence to receive insight and messages and visions of what was foul and good that will come in this next year. You can set aside a time to do that. And particularly in the calendar I provided, there are some interesting moments still to plan a wild hunt procession, if you will, and not be part of it as well, of your festivities also. But similarly, this whole time of the sun coming back, the light coming back, is also a time of divination and a time of prophecy. And so I would encourage you to set aside a moment. Maybe the full moon that is coming very soon in Cancer is a great time to do this. But any time, Thursday, whatever is working for you, as a way to sort of say, yes, this is a moment I want to do this. But setting aside some time now, and that this is our moment to celebrate an old Yule. Usually, in some cultures, a lot of drinking and beer drinking was important at this time. So thinking about sacred intoxication and intoxicants' purpose within our society as a medicine, not as a poison. And I think that, each of us has to assess that and think about that within our own frame. So find some way to mark this moment. For many people, they celebrate Three Kings Day, which happened on the 6th, not that long ago. And there are many practices that you can look into that have to do with Epiphany. But the same message is there. It's questing for the light. It's the magi, the wise ones, looking for their guiding light. And then there's lots of beautiful things like marking the threshold of your house with the year and letters of the three kings to bless your threshold. That might not be appropriate to you, but thinking about how you entangle at this time with things that encourage a way to move in a blessed way in relation to your home, in relation to the land, in relation to the dead. This is the time for it. And then celebrating the return of the light and seeing, what insights you get as you engage with all those things. So that's my bit, about the dark time of year. And so now we'll turn to looking a little bit at the Venus retrograde. So right now as we speak, and I'll share my screen with you, it's somewhere here. Right now we can see that and I'll get my pen out, but right now we can see that the moon, that Venus is meeting with the sun right now. And so my pen is working. Let's see, we can see that right there. Let me perhaps make it a bolder color so it's a little bit easier to see. We'll make it a nice bright pink. So we can see there that Venus is retrograding. It is joined with the sun. All right, so this is the halfway mark, if we think about it, between the Venus retrograde. This is the real turning point. So if you've noticed certain themes arising because of this is a turning point. Right now is an important moment. Take heed, particularly if you have important axes or planets that are in this sort of 16, well, we could say 15 to 20, 22 band. If you have something there, then it's important to maybe consider. And the more intimately that position is linked to joining directly with the Cazimi, the more powerful it is for you personally. The more activated they are, the more powerful it is for you. But here's the other thing that I want to say is this is the new moon of Venus. This is where Venus has gone through her waning phase that I've spoken about as she has made her way towards the sun. And I showed you in some of the other videos how Venus is shifting in her light as she's giving up the last bit of light. She's entered into the underworld. I hope that you've celebrated that in the way and honored her entry into the underworld in your own way. That it didn't seem right to give people more to do over the holiday season because people already feel quite overwhelmed. So that's why my advice the whole time has been just write it with the awareness that this is speaking to you about all of these things, because it is. It definitely is. And so what I would say is the Cazimi is the new moon of Venus. And if we look, to see kind of what are some other things that are contributing, you can set a chart for the exact Cazimi, which is about to happen, for your local time and space, and look at that chart interpretively and think about it as the way we think about a new moon, which is a reseeding of the significations of the moon and the Sun as it relates to their course. Here we're talking about the Sun-Venus relationship, the way in which Venus comes into her own, shows her own light, asserts her independence from the Sun before the Sun, which is what's going to happen as Venus starts to go retrograde, or as she continues on her retrograde and then stations direct towards the end of January. We'll see, that she comes to this point where she's going to station direct at the 29th of January at 11 Capricorn, and at that point will start to show herself slowly over time. Has probably already shown it starting around the 15th, 22nd of January, because this is when the Sun has already progressed on to a certain extent. Venus will start showing herself as a morning star. That's Venus's crescent phase, moving towards her light, where she, her full moon phase is like the superior conjunction, where it is Earth, Sun, Venus in this way. So this is the new moon. This is the seeding of her significations. And I do think something that's interesting, and it's not the direction that Venus herself is going, and we have looked at the new things that she's going to encounter, but I have been really interested in how, get the pen back out, how for me, I've also, and many of us have been, we've been probably sitting with this stuff that is starting to happen in another nocturnal feminine sign that is very important right now for us, which is the sign of Pisces. And we see how, in terms of aspect, the sextile aspect between this area of the sky that Venus and the Sun are having their Cazimi, and also Neptune, is kind of showing itself. So the way in which there is a playing with appearance and form kind of showing itself within that context. But what I would like to turn to more, is just the fact that all of this is happening with Pluto there. We know that Pluto has been really important in Venus's journey into the underworld, and Venus will conjoin Pluto again on the 3rd of March. After she's stationed direct and has left, and it will be kind of right around the same time that she is showing her having left the retrograde shadow. So what I'd like to sit with around this is that it's hard to, it's an interesting one. It's difficult to particularize certain things, but I'm going to talk now about my experience as it relates to this. And the reason I feel obligated and feel like I should is my ascendant sign is Cancer, and my moon is at 17 degrees of Capricorn. And so for me, this has been a moment where I have really been sitting with, and very personally, but also because it's in my 7th as it relates to my partnership and to the role that those things play in my life about teaching me about life. And what I'd like to do is be a little bit more open about my own experience, but then also talk about what I think is important. I said last time that Capricorn to me is a super important sign, and the reason that is because it's forming that solstitial axis. It's marking winter in the same way that Cancer marks summer. And the reason that I think that this has a great value for us to reflect on around this is that the way in which it hits so many things for me. Something I've been trying to move towards within my own life over the last several years is a more animist perspective, like being spontaneously present within my experience of things. And what's been interesting is a lot of that has to do with paying attention to things that probably are more subtle in some ways, but also giving so much more heed directly to materiality the materiality of things. And normally materiality is kind of a dirty word, like for us, because it's become conflated with a denial of things outside of the scientific materialistic empirical paradigm. But what I think this time really calls for is a completely new form of materiality, one that sees the living of the material, the life of material, is almost invested in it, and sees it as something that is sacred in its materiality itself. And I think we can take that on all different levels. Um, there almost is, like, this is a spell that allows us to know something true again about physical reality, which is that it is holy and sacred and something to be uh, cherished and thought of as so special. And the way that we are with material things is something that needs to change. We know this. Not thinking of them as dead substances that can be utilized as passive resources for our play of our mind is ridiculous. We have to move beyond that now. And I think that this concern for the value of the material of things in a way that sees it as sacred and holy, is very important in this signature. The other thing that I think this holds, because it holds that the dead and the process of decay and death is intimately tied to the continuation of what we think of as ongoingness and life. As much as Cancer is signaling the birth, Capricorn is signaling our death. And the sacredness of that and those things that have gone into that space, be it through decomposition and decay and slow processes or faster ones, but this speaks to a slower decaying that goes on, but how that decaying is vital in the way in which life returns, which I think ties very beautifully to the work we've been exploring also in the nighttime of year, but also because Venus is a planet that speaks to life, and in this place that is ruled by Saturn, which is a planet that holds things about death. But also recognizing the beauty and the elegance within all those things and their importance, and into the whole unfolding of things, I think is vital at this moment. But the other piece that maybe this kind of manifests for a lot of us is what really matters to us in terms of our commitments, and especially as it is a Venus retrograde, our commitments as it relates to those that we love, and also, as I said before, to those that we are indebted to, or to those that we owe or are responsible for, and sometimes this is a very weird dynamic. Trust me, I know all about, I don't know all about it yet. I am learning. But Capricorn moon with my ascendant being in Cancer is very important. Codependency and thinking about how we enable and disable people to empower ourselves or disempower ourselves is a really important thing to think about in this moment. But similarly, how our level of wisdom and our level of knowing things is what makes us more responsible. And I'm talking about responsibility in probably a more animist way, which is the more we know, the more responsible we are. And in a lot of animist cultures, but I know it best in Australian Aboriginal cultures, I think it speaks very much. Any continuing culture that has lasted ages, ages, and ages, the longest continuing cultures in the world are there in Australia. And in my opinion, Capricorn speaks to what endures, My thing I always said about it, it's like most of what we get up to and toil in is so ephemeral and so fleeting. It's Capricorn reminds us that what is, if we had one thing to etch or carve into a stone that will stand as a testament to what we care about and what we value and where our responsibility lies, that we feel like we have to carve it into that stone to outlive not only us but many generations. This is what this sign speaks to for me, you know. And so in Australian Aboriginal cultures, at least as far as I understand it, which I know many other people have more nuanced idea around it, there's a difference. It's not so much a focus on what people's rights are, but more about what our responsibilities are. And I think that our responsibilities to materiality and to the literal weaving of relationships within the world, within our world right now, I think is something that this speaks to. I think it speaks to us knowing that. And also, you know, the other piece that I've sat with it too is really how fucking lonely people are right now, more than ever. And whatever we can do to help ourselves feel less alone, and whatever we can do to help others feel less alone, it's time to do this. We need to. It is, and for those of us that know how to do it, it's our responsibility to do this. You know, it is. And I don't mean that in some weird dependent, codependent way. This is also about undoing that. There are things that are not our responsibility also. But this is the question that I think is held within this Cazimi, is knowing in a deep way what you are truly responsible for and what you are not truly responsible for. What needs to be released so that it can die and decay so that new things can come about, and valuing this process. I mean, the process of life is the process of death. And I think the more we're akin to that or know that, make kin with that, the better, because then we're really in it. We are in the relation to life itself. So I want to keep this video short. I hope I've given you enough to reflect on. I want to end by talking about the loneliness that I think is there within the world at this time, and allowing us to be able to feel that and see where we have a responsibility to shifting that, you know, and also to see where our responsibility of remembering the sacredness of the material and remembering its holy qualities and the way in which we are embedded and held within things that are so old, you know, and been here for so long, and why they matter, you know. These are the things we need to remember, what needs to sustain and what needs to be let go of. And this is a vital moment to be able to do this. And I don't think it's done. It's not Cazimi and job done. It's now Venus going through the rest of what she will encounter as she goes direct. And, you know, Venus's trials over the next little bit of time are quite intense. And I'll just share that with you. This is an interesting moment because even though we would normally think of Venus being debilitated, retrograde, all of this, the Cazimi is a moment where she is in the lap of the sun and is in her own bound, you know, her own term. She is also the day triplicity lord of the earth signs. So there are some things that are actually very dignifying about Venus at this very moment that we need to pay attention to. So let me just put my screen back up there. Go. Okay, so what I was going to say, if we just look at the next few weeks, you know, Venus carries on with her retrograde. Come the end of the month, there's the stationing direct. Already Mars has joined Venus. So Mars, we know, has a lot of dignity within the Earth sign of Capricorn. And in that way, Mars is in a really strong position to sort of, Venus bona fides Mars, but Mars is sort of, Venus is also debilitated by Mars's action too. So this is already starting a quite intense experience where Venus is having to have her um, close proximity to Mars, and they stay together for quite a long time. And Venus and Mars, though, are like two sides of the same coin. And I think that this is a great moment to understand that. It might be more powerfully so from a martial side, and maybe that is the side that's useful for us on a personal level to emphasize right now. But it is true, that they share that. And so we see that they cruise along together, and in March they enter Aquarius together. And so now we see something that is even more dicey, might be the right word. Dicey, maybe is the right word, which is that at least for as that's not going to help us. At least as far as Venus is concerned, herself, Venus is now sandwiched between Mars and Saturn, and that lasts for a while longer because she's still going slow, but she's faster than Mars, and it's going to get closer and closer, that sort of squeeze, if you will, between the two of them. And so we kind of come to the head of it roughly towards the end of March. So this all represents if we're timing things around a Venusian clock for some reason. Again, Venus is being enclosed by the malefics. It's that sandwich between a rock and a flamethrower, if you will. But at the same time, Venus bonifies that condition by her presence. She is not as powerful as Saturn is within that context. So Saturn has kind of got the upper hand around the agenda. But it also, because she bonifies it, it also doesn't make it worse. It just makes it worse for her. So when we are thinking about Venusian type things, it's rough going for the things that we normally think of as sociality, pleasure, joviality as it relates. Joviality we might want to just hand over to Jupiter, but there is a sort of relaxed enjoyment quality that's there for Venus. We might not be experiencing that at this time, but one of the beautiful things is after all of that, come, I believe it's the 5th of April, and I only know because I feel very fortunate. This is my birthday this year, and my solar return. Venus has just moved into Pisces where Jupiter is. So then even when Mars joins her there, and joins Jupiter there, there's no way that Mars really spoils the fun in the end. I'm sure there'll be something that he has to contribute because Mars is of this cosmos. But this is what I want to say is, this next little bit of time between now, Venus's first appearance, she becomes more active in her agenda, but is actively involved with things that have a heavier and a more intense quality up until this moment in April. So this is something I will hope to try to have one more video about before we're done with this, and I will hope to speak a little bit more to Venus. But thank you all so much. I hope that you enjoy Old Yule if you're Yuling, and I hope that you're getting a lot out of the Venus Cazimi. I am going to include, for those that want to go a little bit deeper within the Venus work, I am going to include the audio from a journey that I did where we do journey into the underworld, and I speak about how we look back at the world of the living from the eyes of the dead, using some of my familiarity with the Dance of Darkness, Buto, and it's there for you if you feel called to do that. It's a really empowering moment to do this, because when we are able to see life from the side of the eyes of the dead, a lot of things change about how we see how precious and special the relationship between life and death is, and between and this moment that we have. So I wish you all the best, and until next time, stay well, and uh, I wish you all the best.